Anything. This is a show where your questions make the show. If I don't have questions, I don't have a show. This is the Ask Earl Anything for February 2020. And today's show, I got a bunch of questions, a lot of good questions from some old friends. And remember, if you have a question, feel free to ask it. And I will do my best to try to answer the questions as best I can. So let's get started. First question comes from Babinga Basher. This is Todd. He used to go by Toasty, now it's Babinga Basher. Check out his channel. He's just got a couple subs. He said, for the next Ask Earl Anything, when you first started doing covers, did you find yourself being very critical of your playing? This has been a completely different animal for me. I'm suddenly become the front man. I went to the back and watched some footage from 7-8 years ago, and it was like watching a different drummer. My backbeats on these vids were so weak. It's been my first issue I've been addressing. Anyhow, it's been a great learning experience. I'm grateful you're willing to take time to help anyone and ask any questions. Thanks. All right, Todd, great question. One of the biggest things I found about doing YouTube videos is the fact that when I do YouTube videos, I can actually watch my playing. And that's a big part of it. So I kind of learn my little ticks in my playing, the way I hold the stick, the way I hold the brushes, the way I approach my fills, the way I rush my fills or drag my fills, depending on which day of the week it is. I've become very aware of where I put the kick drum and how I'm always a little ahead. This has been playing in the studio has taught me that too. There are guys who are like human metronomes with the metronome. They put a click on and they stay right on top of the click. And for me, I'm always a little bit ahead with my kick drum. So that tends to make pushes the groove a little bit in a different way. So those are all things I've learned and things I work on because I'm aware of these things because I'm watching myself play all the time. I also watch how I look on camera, coming around the kit. And I think, one of the things I've noticed about drum covers for me is if somebody looks awkward at the kit, they usually sound awkward too. And that's a big thing for me is the sound. I'm always trying to get the sound, and that's why I want to match my headphone mix with what I'm hearing in the overheads and my kick and my snare to the track, and that inspires me to play. So those are all things I take into account. But yeah, the more I play on camera, the more I see the things I do wrong. I see the things in my form and in my technique that are lacking. Now, I will say this, after 45 years of playing drums, it's pretty hard to change your technique. You've got certain things, and I can tell you my technique has taken me as far as I can go. And there are days where I just don't have the chops to pull out certain things. Then there's other things that I can kind of do my Earl slop through thing, and it kind of sounds cool and it works. And that's kind of the feel thing. And one thing I noticed about older drummers from my day, back in the 60s and 70s and before that, is they all had their little way of doing rudiments and their hands and their feet. And those things came out in their playing and their feel. So that's what made their feel. And I think what we're losing a lot today with metronomic timing and being gridded is we're losing that feeling, that lopey thing that made a player have a certain sound. There was a day when you heard a certain player on the radio and you said, oh, that's Jeff Porcaro, that's Russ Kunkel, that's Steve Gadd. It was apparent in their sound. Today it's less likely you can pull that off. You're not sure who it is because a lot of times they grid everybody and they take a lot of that human piece out of who's playing. So we all tend to sound the same. So one of the cool things I found in my videos is that I kind of sound like me. And that's what I say to guys when people say things to me like, why did you play it this way? Why didn't you play the fill that was on the record? Well, part of the reason why I do drum covers, the way I do drum covers with drumless tracks, is that I like to get my vibe on the song. And I think a lot of guys watch my videos because of the vibe I bring to the song. Which brings me to my next question, and I'm kind of skipping around a little bit today, but where's the question? Oh, here it is. This comes from Richard Burton, longtime viewer. He said, could you do an Ask Earl Anything about channeling emotion? Now this came after me doing a bunch of drum covers where I was really laying my vibe in, on it. I did a Keith Green cover, Grace by Which You Stand, and a friend of mine named Michael Sean Terrell. I actually used to play out with this guy, Mike Terrell. I did one of his songs. This was on one of his songs, and they caught my emotional vibe in the music. And what I would say is, again, I want to leave everything on the table. When I'm finished, I want to put everything I have into something. And I want that emotion to come kicking through. And usually when I pick a song, when I let a track get through, it's because I sense some kind of emotion in there that I connected to. If I didn't connect emotionally to the music, I can tell it in my playing, and I usually don't choose the track. And I don't want to phone it in. I said this once to a bunch of guys I play music with a lot. I said, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show up at rehearsal, and I'm not going to be phoning it in during rehearsal. I'm going to be throwing my passion from square one, So having your passion in your playing has got to be there. Now, the problem with passion in the playing is if you cannot control the tempo, you cannot control your volume, you cannot control your emotions where you let something run away and it makes it sound out, that's when you have problems. I think that's where a lot of YouTube drummers have issues, is they can't sit back. When they get emotionally into the song, they start throwing and then they start rushing. And that's something that I've been dealing with my whole life, because that's what I knew playing with records early on, was that I would be rushing the fills, rushing to get back into the groove. And that's where it feels unsettled. And great players can tell, great players know how to transition into the next section of a song without it sounding off. That's the key thing there. So now, a lot of the music I do, I will be honest, a lot of the music that comes from the 60s and 70s and 80s was done without a click. So there's like the band playing together thing, and they do kind of move together. And that's kind of interesting playing drum covers, because that's one of the things I realize a lot. But you could also feel that the reason why they were moving was their emotions. So putting your emotions into your playing is really important. And I think a lot of people enjoy playing with me because I do play with my emotions. I don't enjoy watching guys that are all technically, they played the right part, but there's no emotion in it. I don't care if you can read the notes and play what's on the page. If you can't put a little bit of you in there and get a little vibe in there, then guess what? It just doesn't speak to me. And by the way, if you've been anybody that's ever read music, gone to music school, or studied with a teacher, and you're reading parts off of a chart or something, even if you're reading music, you still have to put the emotion in it. That's why they write in things with dynamics. This section's pianissimo, softly. Mezzo forte, you start building a little bit louder. Fortissimo, you're way loud. Okay? It's building dynamics. There's crescendos built in, little signs that crescendo. It's like basically a backwards arrow, kind of crescendoing up, or decrescendos coming down. Music comes down. So music has ups and downs, hills and valleys, emotion. Emotion's critical, Richard, to playing drums, and it's critical in my playing a drum cover or playing any music. I want to bring my emotions to it, but the balance is controlling the emotions with technically being in tempo, technically not choking the fill, whatever that means. And I choke enough fills so I can tell you all about that. So I've choked plenty of them. Anyhow, that's 2 questions. Next question comes from Brian Corey. And Brian Corey says, for the next Ask Earl Anything, I just bought an Evans heavyweight snare head for my piccolo. Do you know anything about it? It's definitely an upgrade from a Remo Ambassador, but I'm still not 100% happy. How do you get a perfect snare pop? Well, with a piccolo, it's usually not that hard to get a perfect snare pop. I will say this about tuning a snare drum. I tune the bottom head tighter than the top. That's my tuning technique for the snare drum. So on this drum I have today, my DMR cast aluminum. That's the top head. That's the snares. See how much higher? Those of you with perfect pitch will know what it is. I think it's up a couple, probably a step or two. I usually tighten the bottom head pretty tight, and then I tune the top head down, okay, from there. Now, depending on where you want the drum, I still keep the bottom head that same tightness, because I find snare response is better with a tight bottom head. A lot of guys try to tune both heads at the same tension, top and bottom, and I find that doesn't really cut it for me. That's just me. Some guys may get great sounds, but it always sounds a little boxy to me. And I want the drum to have like kind of a nice little snap. Okay, now this one is tuned with a muffler on it, so you can hear it. Muffling has an effect to the snare drum too, but that snare sound against a tight bottom resonant head does something where it pops. So there's a pop in that drum, even with the muffling taken off versus on. All right, so that's how I get the sound, and I think I told you to do that. You sent me a video of your drum, tighten the bottom head, and then you can tighten the snares where you need to put them. But that's how I get the sound out of my snare drums. Piccolo, deep snare drum doesn't really matter. Bottom head's tighter than the top head. That's the starting point anyhow. All right, my next question comes from Adam, AR Drummer. He says, how many snares do you currently own, and which is your favorite? Great question, Adam. Currently, I have, let me go through the list. 10x14 Yamaha. I got an 8x14 Black Magic, 6.5x14 cast aluminum, a 7x14 DMR solid walnut, a 6.5x14 Gretsch 6-ply maple gum drum. Then I got a 5.5x14 Black Beauty. I've got a Yamaha Steve Jordan. I've got a Pearl Omar Hakim. I've got the Acrolite, Ludwig Acrolite. I've got a Gretsch 5x14 chrome over brass. And I have my Noble Coolie, which is not here. It's not here at my house right now because I sent my Noble Coolie to Noble Coolie to get refinished. And yes, when my Noble Coolie comes back, it's going to no longer be that champagne silver sparkle look that it had. For all those years, I had a drum kit that color at one point, but it's going to now have a look similar to my Gretsch kit. I sent it back to the factory. So I guess I have 11 snare drums. And I will tell you, my favorite snare drum will be the one that I'm playing that week. Which, as soon as the Noble Coolie comes back, I'm sure it'll be the Noble Coolie for a while. I'll have like a thing with it. I had a thing with the Acrolite for a while. That was my drum of choice for a couple weeks there once I got it. So usually the newest drum in becomes my drum of choice for a while. But I think every drum has a certain sound for a certain vibe. And I have to be honest that certain drums have certain vibes that I enjoy, and I want to bring them in. You know. Now I have some other drums hanging around. Any other drums you see in my studio that you might see for some reason in a camera angle? I have a piccolo in here. It's my son-in-law's. I have my son-in-law's 5x14 Yamaha stage custom snare drum. I've got a Tama in here, but those drums I don't play really. I played the piccolo I think once on one video maybe. I don't really go to those drums. They're not drums I go to. My go-to drums are those 11 drums I just mentioned, and I rarely go to the marching drum. So my new favorite drum will be the Noble Coolie when it gets back to Papa at home. When I get it back home, I'm sure I'm going to do a video about it too, because the transformation's pretty wild, and I'll tell you why I did it and everything else on that video. So thanks for asking the question, Adam. Great question. Another question. This is from Lori Jones. Lori Jones asked a few questions. He said, what are my thoughts on the 602 Modern Essentials Paiste and have had any experience with oak drums. So let's take the oak drum first. To be honest, I have not really played oak drums. I kind of sat down on a Yamaha oak custom kit once, but they seem a little hard and they're not really my thing. Everybody I've heard playing the oak customs, they're kind of cutting. I don't like the oak drums. I don't like oak sticks, and I don't like oak drums. So that's because they're hard. And my experience with oak drumsticks goes back to my first pair of ProMark oak, drumsticks that I got when I was in high school. And I used to break them all the time. Hitting the cymbal, I'd break them because they were so dense and so hard. And they hurt my hands. Like, I'd play with them and they'd hurt my hands. So, again, I don't know how that translates to the drum sound, really, because I've only played on one like in a store or something. But in actuality, I think they're probably a little bit too hard of wood for me to enjoy. My favorite wood drums would be maple or mahogany, with birch coming in there third. And I kind of dig the walnut snare drum. It's different. It's got its own little dark thing going on with it. And I like all kinds of drums. As you can see, I got the fiberglass pearl kit up today. I was doing some drum covers. Matter of fact, I just did a drum cover. I don't know if this drum cover is going to come out before Ask Earl Anything or after. But I had a friend from work, actually, a work friend, who has a channel on off-roading. I don't know if it's motorbikes or I can't remember what it was exactly. I think it may be his truck, trucks off-roading kind of thing. Anyhow, he asked me to play Indigata da Vida. I have to tell you, that was a trip. I cut it this morning. I literally played the track twice. My biggest problem was figuring out what kit to play with it. And I don't really have the chops, those 70s chops, to really pull off some of the ways Ron Bushy, the original drummer for Iron Butterfly, played them. Plus, I had to figure out how to make the drum solo section work without trying to play over top of Ron Bushy, because I didn't want to do that. So I actually took this track, I laid a click track on it, which was interesting. Because the click is kind of a moving click. They're not steady by any stretch of the imagination. And I had to play along with this moving click, keep the drum solo in my own thing, and then come out of it at the right time and back into the vibe that he was doing. So it was interesting. And of course, it's a 18-minute song. And which of you guys are going to watch it for 18 minutes? Probably nobody. But the one thing I didn't do is I didn't cut it up. I did not cut the video up, other than I had two cameras going. So it's a two-camera shoot thing. But one of the things I don't do in my drum videos is I don't basically, I'll say I've done it twice in the almost 500 videos I've got. 2 times that I take a piece of something from another video. And one time it was the front end was so perfect and the back end was so not perfect that I took it on one of my jazz tunes. You'd have to go search to find it. If you can, a matter of fact, no one's ever called me out on it, so nobody knew I did it even. But I know I did it. That's the one I can remember, and there may be one other song, but I don't, as a rule, take from alternate takes and get work sections out and put them together. I just don't do that. You just don't see. You don't see the camera go to black on me. Usually you watch the camera going the whole time, and it's in one take. So I did 2 takes of Iron Butterfly, Indigata da Vida, and you get what you get. It's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect, but it's got a vibe. Going back to vibe again. It has a vibe to it. And when I did the solo section, I kept something together. I had some ideas. I kind of similar types of ideas that Ron Bushy did, but nothing like what he played at all. But it was my vibe, And you know what? Most guys are going to go to the 5-minute mark and watch the drum solo section, and then they're going to be done. If they go to the end where the other fills are, that's a little bit more tenuous for me. I had a little bit more of a struggle with it, but to be honest, I only played it twice. So, but how did I get off on that? Well, I was talking about oak drums. But that's why the fiberglass kit's set up. I love fiberglass drums, by the way, especially these concert toms. These are a lot of fun to play. And they were perfect for that song. this is the setup I used. So, modern essentials. Next question was from Laurie Jones. He said, what are my thoughts on the 602 modern essentials? First off, the Paiste 602s, I love them. I'd love to have a set of modern essentials. I would love to. The Vinny cymbals. I just can't spend $600 for a ride cymbal. I just can't. I didn't spend $600 for this cymbal. This cymbal goes for $398, and I got this on a discount. It was like somewhere around $300 when I bought this. That's about as much as I want to spend on a ride cymbal, to be honest. The most I've ever spent on a ride cymbal was the 22-inch Crope. And I bought that at Maxwell's Drum Shop the year it came out, and I got that for brand new $465 that year. That's the most I've ever spent on a ride cymbal. I know they cost a lot of money. I just don't want to spend the money on them, you know? So that's my problem with them. Other than that, sounds great. Awesome. If you can afford the modern essentials, go for it. You know what I'm saying? And some guys are willing to pay whatever they need to pay to get that certain sound they want. You know, I'm quite happy with my sound right now. I mean, I'd like to get maybe a Paiste 2002 22-inch ride. That's what I'd like to get. So I'd like to get a set of 15-inch Sound Edge hats, I think. Or if I could find a Sound Edge bottom 505 for this set of hats, I'd like that too. I love the 505s. 505s have got that 2002 thing. My Paiste experience is I love the 2002 vibe, the B8 sound. And that's what my giant beats are. That's what my 2002s are. That's what the big beat is. That's what the 505 is. It's the B8 alloy. So my Paiste cymbals are B8 alloy. I'm quite happy with that. I've got a few of the B15 signature style cymbals, but they're not my favorites. I will tell you that 20-inch Dark Energy Ride Mark I prototype I have, it's the GAD cymbal. I mean, when I do something that's GAD-ish, I throw that cymbal up now. That's my thing. That's what I used on Steely Dan Asia when I did Asia. And that's the right cymbal. It's the sound. It's the right sound. It's that sound I was listening to, and then when I found it, I got it. I was like, that's cool. And then when I went to Maxwell's Drum Shop and I found the 22-inch Crope, I said, that's cool. That's the Tony Williams thing. That's that really dark, big, washy thing. That was cool. And then I came back home and I realized I can't use it on pop stuff. It doesn't really work. It works in the church washy thing, but it doesn't really work on pop stuff. And then I bought the 24-inch Giant Beat Ride, and it was really big and really glassy and really pretty and really nice, but it was just a little too much, and I wanted a 22, and I was going to get a 22-inch Giant Beat because they just came out that year, and I saw the deal on this big beat, and I'm glad I got it. And truthfully, I almost got a 22-inch 2002 that year too. So my thing is I'm really into 22-inch ride cymbals. I think they got a certain low pitchness to them because they're big. I really dig that. This is the 20-inch Giant Beat, by the way. The 20-inch Giant Beat's it's cool. I use it as a ride sometimes. Love it. But this has just got goes a little bit deeper and darker. So, went for this vibe. This is where my vibe's at right now. This is it. And I have some beautiful Sabians. I've got some beautiful Zildjians. I mean, I got some pretty cymbals. So I'm really kind of set for cymbals, but I would tell you that if I had the money, I'd buy a set of, modern essentials. They're great cymbals. Excellent cymbals. I'd buy them. So thank you for that question, Lori. Great question. My last question, I believe, is from Bill Morehouse. And Bill Morehouse asks the question, what do you think of using 14 and 16-inch rack toms instead of floor toms? So I think you're talking about putting them up, mounting them on a tom stand versus floor toms. But unless you mean putting them up here. By the way, this is a 13 and a 15 today. I've got 8, 10, 13, 15 today up here. Sometimes I have 14, 16. I have a 14, 16 set of these. I would say to you, if you want to use them as floor, I've actually taken my floor toms for the Gretsch kit and put rims mounts on them. I have a 16-inch rims mount that's on the 16-inch concert tom right now, and I've got a 14-inch 8-hole rims mount for that floor tom, and I've mounted them up, and they sound awesome mounted up. By the way, you put them on rims mounts, and they sound killer. You put them on feet. I'll tell you the secret to my floor toms. This is my secret to my floor toms, because guys really dig this 16-inch floor tom. The secret to the floor tom for me is this. And I'm going to grab my other floor tom and I'll show it to you. Hold on a second. I'm actually not grabbing the floor tom, I'm grabbing the floor tom leg. If you want to spend 20 bucks, the best 20 bucks I've ever spent on something is the Pearl air suspension feet. They fit on just about anything, I believe. They fit the Pearl and they fit the Gretsch. Maybe if it's a little thicker, it might not fit, but these fit perfectly on the Gretsch stuff. These feet have got this hole in it, and they just kind of they're like a shock absorber, and they kind of sit there on the floor and they bounce. This thing is like being on a rims mount. It just goes boom. Totally enough tone, but it still has that stability. So I'm a big fan of these feet. And usually when I get a drum, the first thing I change on the floor tom is these feet. So that's just me. You know what I'm saying? I think Sonar makes something like that too. I think maybe DW does. DW's got this kind of design of their feet, which is kind of squared to give it more resonance, they say. I don't know if that's true or not. But mounting them up on rims mounts is a great way to start. I will tell you the one thing you don't want to do to a floor tom is drill holes in it if it's a floor tom. I can tell you because I've done it. And it just kind of, my 14x14's got a big hole in it. And to this day, because I put the Pearl mount, this Pearl mount went right through the shell. I did it in 1980, I don't know, 86, you know? And the funny thing was, I was in New York City, and it was before I had rims mounts on my drums. And the rims mount and the mount itself would have cost me 40 bucks that day. And I so wish I bought the rims mount that day. Because if I bought the rims mount, I never would have destroyed that drum. I would have got the same effect, and then I would have realized how dead my toms were without the rims mounts on it. And I would have said, "What? This drum sounds so good, and these sound so bad." Because the one thing that kills a drum faster than anything is sticking an arm through it, through the hole. Now, the L arms don't do that as much. So when you've got it on a shell-mounted L arm, it's a little bit better. But these Pearl mounts that are famous, by the way, so many drums came out with these Pearl mounts, where the Pearl was copying the Rogers memory lock system. And Rogers had a 1-inch hole going through their drums. The original Rogers mounting system was swivel-matic, which was this little thin thing going through, making a hole through it. And Fibes had a very thin, kind of like, I don't know if it was a hexagon or a pentagon shape rod going in their drums. So that was the Rogers swivel-matic. And the early Pearl had something look like a swivel-matic. And Yamaha made something that had that kind of 5-sided, hexagon thing to kind of lock onto, and theirs went through their drums. So the early Recording Customs had something and went through the drums. And Slingerland had one that went through the drums. So everybody was making these tom mounts that went through. Sonar had this monstrous thing for years that went through the drums. But that killed the sound. And then as soon as everybody started going rims mounts, it was kind of like resonation. And it was, boy, oh boy, they were taboo. So then everybody started going to the L-arm, the Ludwig design, the L-arm style. And the rims mounts help the L-arms just like it helps the ones going through the drum. But I think you can get away with the L-arm and get some resonance out of it, where that Pearl mount going through a drum just kills the tone, just kills it. And my Gretsch drums were had that dead tone. But it didn't matter in the 70s. Late 70s, nobody cared. And why didn't they care? They didn't care because they were basically taping everything down, making it sound like that. All right, great sound. All right, let's record one. You know, that was the sound. You know, everything was taped up. Today we're taping things up again. You know, we're going back to trying to find sounds. We're putting tea towels on things again like Ringo did. Those things are back. But the 70s, it was all a cardboard box sound. That was the sound. It's funny how all the sounds come back around. I think the most wildest thing about sound, though, is cymbals. I mean, now you got the broken cymbal sound that everybody's going for. Let's stack a bunch of broken cymbals together, and that sound cool. Let's take some expensive cymbals and make them sound like broken cymbals and put them on top of one another and charge lots of money for people. Yeah, that's what we'll do. And they're doing that. You know, the first guy I saw stack cymbals was Steve Gadd. Steve Gadd with Grover Washington Jr. He's got a stack of cymbals, you know. But he probably wasn't the first. I'm sure there was somebody before him that was stacking cymbals. So, anyhow, that's the drum world as we know it. But yeah, I would say mount them. That's cool. That's a cool way to do it. Mount the floor toms. But if don't mount them with an arm that goes through the drum. Don't drill a hole through a drum like that. You know, if you got the Ludwig style mounts, the L arms, if you want to drill 2 screws and put that on the shell, that's up to you. I will say it devalues the drum. So my Gretsch kit, which I've had forever, which I'm not going to sell anyhow, would probably be devalued. No collector would want to spend big money for it. But I will tell you, there are people that would probably give me $2,000 for this kit just because of the way they sound. And they sound good. So guys love my drums. That's the one thing I get. People love my drums. Anyhow, that's it for Ask Earl Anything. It's the show where your questions make the show. Thank you for watching. And I hope you ask some questions, and we'll have another show in March. Have a great day. Take care. Bye.